Hey everyone, welcome back to Basically Bella TV, and today I'm doing something just a little bit different and slightly out of my comfort zone, and we are going to be doing a little chit chat about Kurt Vonnegut's book Mother Night. This is a project for my class. With that said, hello Dr. Jones, I know you're watching this. I hope I do this book justice, and although I'm not John Green, I'm going to do my best to be entertaining. I just want to start off the video by saying that I am not a book professional. Any statements that I make are merely based off of my own interpretations, my own perspectives, and essentially just me trying to make sense of Kurt Vonnegut's intricate life and the way that he writes. Without further ado, let's jump into the video. So let's start off by talking a little bit about Kurt. I'm from Indiana. I'm from the Fort Wayne area, 2 hours north of Indy. Kurt Vonnegut was born in Indianapolis, Indiana. Hoosiers. So Kurt's life wasn't at all like mine or anybody that I know. His life was full of tragedy and heartbreak. Honestly, if you were to gather 20 people and put all of their life experiences together, I would bet you that Kurt Vonnegut's life experiences have been more tragic, more troubling, more heartbreaking, more emotionally distressful than those 20 random people that we've gathered. However, there were three main themes that I feel that Kurt Vonnegut really continued throughout his writing. So those three themes being religion, humanism, and truth. I see so much of the theme of truth and honestly a lot of the theme of humanism in his book, Mother Night. Let's talk a little bit about what Mother Night is about and pretty much its storyline. Mother Night, from my perspective, starts off with a man named Howard Campbell Jr. and he is from America, but for many different reasons, his family ends up in Germany. Once the war breaks out, his parents move back. He stays in Germany with his wife, Helga, who he had met in Germany and married in Germany. Something that Howard is super passionate about throughout his life is his writing and his acting. So Howard's just basically going about his life in Germany. You know, the war is like starting to go on. All the bad stuff that you learned about that happened in the mid 1940s. Yeah, that stuff's going on really bad. Howard is living during that time period. And I think he's a little disconnected from everything that's going on because it's not directly affecting his life yet. Up until a moment where he is just chilling in a park and this guy comes up next to him, starts a little conversation. He tells him this really creative story, and in this story it's talking about this man who is acting as a spy for the American people, and he's doing all these good things, and it sounds all good. And then Howard's like, oh, he realizes that this guy is basically asking him, hey, we want to recruit you to be a spy for the American people. Are you in? Are you not? Now let's fast forward a little bit. Howard is in his radio broadcast room, which is where he is completing his task as an American spy. He is broadcasting Nazi propaganda, and he is really adding fuel to that fire that is already stirring in those German people who believe in this Nazi idealism. So when reading this book, something that really stood out to me was the pain that came from Howard's life simply because, in my opinion, that came simply because he chose to be an American spy. Now, let's rewind back to how he became a spy. This guy named Frank comes up to him. He makes this story seem too good to be true, which is why I believe that Howard calls him his blue fairy godmother. Makes this opportunity sound so grand. It's gonna be something big for him. Howard can use his passions of writing and acting to help the American people. Honestly, how could that be a lose-lose situation? Like, where are you losing? Not only are you being able to use your passions, but you're able to use them for a good cause. Honestly, I would have probably said yes if I were Howard. But the issue with that comes when we look at how Howard was asked to be a spy. Did Frank ethically ask him to be a spy or not? Did Frank manipulate him and pick up on his vulnerabilities and ask him that way? When we look at it from the eyes of Frank and the way that he asked Howard, I get an uneasy feeling. Frank, in his position, he works for the American government. He knows what comes with being a spy. He knows all the downfalls. And when he was talking to Howard, he only told Howard the good parts. And we see that throughout the rest of the book, how this one decision that he thought was a win-win turned into being his complete and utter downfall. Let's talk about the situation that Howard's in after the war. After the war, not a whole lot of people like him because the American people don't know that he was a spy. Howard learns that only 3 guys in the entire world knew that he was a spy. And so essentially there is no warm welcome for him. There's no good job, you did this for America, you put yourself out there. There's none of that for Howard at all. Once Frank starts coming at him and seeming a little bitter and harsh with him, I got mad because this guy knew what was gonna happen. He knew that Howard was gonna come out of being a spy and basically have nobody to turn to. And then Frank, the one guy that Howard should be able to turn to, is like, I don't know, you did your job a little too well. Maybe you are really a Nazi. Maybe you pretended too hard to be a Nazi that you are a Nazi. Since when is doing your job too well a bad thing? Well, apparently when you're a spy, maybe Howard should just be winning the freaking Oscar for being so good at his job. This whole book should be a compliment to Howard because he did his job so well with such conviction. And yet, you know, that just wasn't what they wanted. For me, the worst part of this is Howard can't even rationalize in his own mind how much help or hurt he did. So when he's making those coughs, when he's making those mannerisms that translate something to the American guys who are listening to him and trying to get information from him, he doesn't know what any of those mannerisms mean. He doesn't know if through his actions he was able to save X amount of lives. He doesn't know any of that. Another thing that Kurt Vonnegut does is he throws in a humanistic perspective. And in Mother Night, there was so much humanism. I felt everything that Howard felt, everything that happened. I felt like I was right there with him. So let me give you a few examples as to why. So let's start with his relationship with his wife, Helga. At the very beginning, when he describes his relationship with Helga, he talks about them being a nation of 2. He just seems so obsessed with this girl. They seem like they work in harmony. It's such a romantic feeling that I get when I read about him and his wife's relationship. So I can only imagine how hard it was for him when he found out that she had died. And then I could only imagine how he felt when they told him that she was actually alive. And I can only imagine how he felt when he figured out that the lady who he thought was his wife was actually his wife's younger sister. Like, anytime Howard started to get something that seemed to go his way, it'd do a 180 on him. Another humanistic perspective through the eyes of Howard is when he realizes how much his work really influenced people. For instance, let's start with Dr. Jones. So everything that Dr. Jones says is just a little wacky, and Howard is under the impression of like, how can there be anybody who would believe anything that Dr. Jones says? This is another quote that Howard has when he comes to the realization that no matter how whack and ignorant he may think something sounds, there are people out there who believe it. And this relates back to the propaganda that he helped spread. Even though that propaganda sounded so whack and so ignorant and so bizarre to Howard, there were people out there in Germany, there were Nazis who listened to that and believed it to the core. This is Campbell's immediate thought after talking to Dr. Jones, and Dr. Jones explains that really whack and bizarre theory of Jesus not being a Jew. Campbell states, "Those whose orders I carried out in Germany were just as ignorant and insane as Dr. Jones. I knew it. God help me, I carried their instructions out anyways." So not only does Howard come back to America with nothing, but throughout this time, he is reflecting and realizing and using that time to see how his actions that he thought were so pure and full of a good intention actually helped to spread this propaganda, inflate this violence, and ultimately kill millions of people. Now, if Howard were a character that didn't spend any of his time reflecting or feeling remorse or feeling guilt or shame for his actions, then this would be a different video. Another quick theme that I want to touch on that I noticed throughout this book is the theme of duplicity. Howard was living a double life. He was an American spy, but also just Howard. And only 3 people in the world knew that he was living this double life. Something that I kept thinking throughout this novel, especially when I finished it, was that Howard could have been any of us. You know, it just takes one person to pick up on our vulnerability, our strengths, and our passions, and our weaknesses. It just takes one person to pick up on those things for us to make a decision that could eventually lead to our downfall. You know, let's put a modern twist on this. For instance, let's take the famous Hannah Montana. So you have Miley Cyrus, the real living human Miley Cyrus, and then you have the character Hannah Montana. For years upon years of Miley Cyrus's early life, she was playing this role of a dual life. You hear interview after interview of Miley Cyrus, and she talks about how her character of playing that dual life really took a toll on her mental health. When you're living a dual life, it's almost like you don't know what people expect from you. Did she know what this was going to involve on her mental state before she got into it? Did it sound like a really good idea at first? But it also took a really big toll on her mental health. And it's something that she's still dealing with to this day, all the pressure that was on her to be both Miley Cyrus and Hannah Montana. And honestly, I think it lives in each one of us. For instance, I'm a daughter, a sister, a girlfriend, a student. I'm all those things. All of those traits of me, all of those different parts of my life equate to who I am. Do I change slightly within each of those roles? I think we would all be lying if we said that none of us changed anything about us within those different roles. So essentially, if there's one thing that I could say about Mother Night, it's that Howard, I know he's a fictional character, but if he were real, I would grab this book and frame it, because that book would be my biggest compliment. Also, before this video ends, I just want to tell you guys to go look up Rihanna's song, Take a Bow. Look at those lyrics, listen to that song. It 100%, okay, it like 90% relates to Howard's life right now. Just him being a spy and all. I just had to throw that in. I'll put a link to that song in the description. Okay, thanks for listening. I hope you guys learned something.